Hello, everyone. Welcome to this month's Research Showcase. My name is Kinneret Gordon, and I am the lead research community officer on the WMF research team. Research showcases are, as you probably know, monthly convenings organized by our team to recognize and share recent research on or relevant to the Wikimedia projects. For those of you joining us live, we welcome you to ask questions of the speakers in the YouTube chat. We will monitor these questions and pass them on to the speakers at the end of each presentation. We kindly ask that all the attendees follow the friendly space policy and the Universal Code of Conduct. Before we get started, one quick announcement this time around. Wiki Workshop registration is now open. Wiki Workshop will be happening on June 20th virtually and is free to register. The registration link should be in the chat very soon, so please sign up. I will now pass it over to Isaac, who will introduce the theme and speakers of this month.
Thanks, Kinneret. Hi, everyone. I'm Isaac. I'm a senior research scientist at the Wikimedia Foundation, and I'm glad to introduce the May 2024 Research Showcase. Today's topic will be on the transition from readers to editors. In a world in which Wikipedia is sustained for many generations to come, what is the best strategy for converting readers into new editors? And then how do you retain them once they've made that big step? So for a long time, the concept of Wikipedians being born, not made, was common wisdom, because that is what typified those editors who had made Wikipedia what it was. That is, successful editors fit into a particular type of person who will find their way into the projects, perhaps reading a while or fixing a spelling mistake or even doing a little bit of vandalism. And then they would get hooked for good and contribute in positive ways. But I see the projects being presented today as an important broadening of this idea of some sort of natural leveling up of reader to editor. They show that alternative paths are possible and probably necessary, and that by providing a wide variety of socio-technical supports for readers and editors, individuals need not be born to stick around. Our first project today will be presented by Mike Raish and Daisy Chen and focus on this transition from being a reader to being an editor on Wikipedia. Mike Raish joined the Wikimedia Foundation in 2021 as a lead design researcher with a background in linguistics, Arabic language instruction, and proficiency assessment. On the Wikimedia Foundation design research team, he primarily helps teams in the product and technology department to answer tactical and strategic questions through human-centered research. Currently based in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, where he enjoys spending time away from the computer with his partner and two cats. Daisy Chen is the lead design researcher. She initially joined the foundation in 2012 as a paralegal, then pivoted into design research 2 years later. This discipline better sates her innate need to ask endless questions of others on any and every topic. She's based in the Bay Area in California, United States, and reads, cooks, hikes, and cuddles with her partner and Shiba pup during off-work hours. Hopefully both the pup and the cats will be joining us today at some point. Our second project will be presented by Morten Warnke Wang and focuses on the experience of those individuals who have created an account and are transitioning to becoming an editor. Morten is a staff data scientist in the product analytics team at the Wikimedia Foundation. He has a PhD from the Group Lens Research Lab at the University of Minnesota, where his research focused on content quality and peer production communities like Wikipedia and OpenStreetMap. Since joining the Wikimedia Foundation in 2018, his main focus has been supporting the growth team's work on understanding and improving the newcomer experience in Wikipedia. After each talk, we'll have about 10 minutes for a discussion. We're happy to take your questions on the YouTube chat, and my colleague Miriam will monitor the chat and relay the questions during Q&A. And with that, I'm going to pass it to Mike and Daisy. Take it away, Mike.
Thank you, Isaac. I'm going to share my screen here. Okay, are we seeing my screen?
Yep.
Okay, excellent, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Isaac, thank you, Kinneret, and thank you, Wikimedia research community, for having us. My name is Mike, and along with my colleague Daisy, I'm very pleased to share with you some of the findings and highlights from a qualitative research project that we conducted within the last year on the design research team. On the design research team in the Wikimedia Foundation, we do a range of types of research. Typically, we're supporting various teams in the product and technology department that have questions. Often these questions are granular, excuse me. For instance, sometimes product teams are interested in, for example, which portion of this onboarding for this particular product is giving users trouble, for example. Today, we're going to be talking about the results of a research study that we did trying to address some bigger questions. Product teams likewise often come to our team on the design research team asking us questions like, how do readers and editors talk about their journeys, their relationship with Wikipedia over their lives, and how can we use this this knowledge or this feedback from readers and editors to kind of help us better conceptualize the relationships that are that Wikimedia users have with Wikipedia and its sister projects. So today we're going to share with you some kind of high level or selected findings from this research project. It took us a while. We did a lot of interviews. So we've kind of just pulled out a couple of tidbits here. But I'll also say that if anyone has any questions, either live or watching this recording later, please don't hesitate to reach out either to myself or to Daisy. And we'll be happy to continue that conversation. So, all right, here we are talking about the Journey Transitions project. So where did this project come from? What were we asked to do? As Isaac mentioned in the introduction, in the essentially framing for these two presentations we're going to hear today, we heard that the foundation is interested in kind of understanding the contours of users' relationship with Wikipedia and its sister projects. There are a lot of different metaphors that have been used inside the foundation over the years to describe these relationships and to describe the trajectories that individual users, be they readers or editors, go through as they essentially navigate their lives and use Wikipedia during various stages of their lives. And in this case, we were interested to see if we could identify the transition points. So essentially precipitating events that punctuate different life stages or different journey stages that are shared between readers and editors in a couple of different languages. The diagram that we're looking at on this page is one that predated this research project, but it is here because it represents essentially I'd say a pretty good visual representation of the ways that the journey of readers and editors is or has commonly been talked about both within the foundation and elsewhere. So we can see that, like in this diagram here, there are various stages of relationship. Different user types is another way to think about it that are mapped out. We have first encounter, first visit, casual reader. There's room for decisions to be made. We can take some right turns and some left turns, et cetera. But essentially, we're looking at more or less a linear progression from the left side of the screen to the right side of the screen, where we culminate in this concept of experienced editor. Here's another diagram. This diagram actually did emerge from this design research project and in the design team's involvement in it. Again, we're looking at kind of a linear progression, casual reader, loyal reader, and we can see we're progressing horizontally in terms of moving through a succession of stages, and we're also progressing, I guess, horizontally in terms of deepening impact or deepening relationship and engagement with Wikipedia and its community. So this represents kind of a distillation of some of the assumptions that various team members had when we embarked on this project. And this essentially is kind of the goal. We're looking, or represents the goal, the original goal of this project. We're looking for the different events or decisions that delineate these different phases. Here we have the various research questions that our project stakeholders or the requesting teams came to us with. How do readers and editors think about their journeys? How do they describe them? We're interested in the metaphors, the linguistic devices, framing devices. How do people talk about their relationship? We were also interested to talk to readers and editors and figure out what does it mean to you to be a Wikipedia reader? What does it mean to be an editor? From the metric side, traditionally, definitions of editor can often be, organized around a central mechanical action, which is making an edit to a Wikipedia page or, content page or talk page. But when you ask editors in Arabic or Spanish, for example, at what point did you become a Wikipedia editor, and what stage of life were you in? That is kind of the direction we were hoping to go in with this project. So in order to answer these questions, we essentially did a bunch of interviews. We recruited 10 editors and 10 readers each in English, Spanish, and Arabic, and we conducted hour-long interviews with them. Some of these interviews were conducted with people who consider themselves to be experienced editors, others with people who consider themselves to be new editors, but essentially, we asked people to talk us through various stages of their lives and the changes in their relationship with Wikipedia as they progress through those life stages. Briefly, this represents more or less the structure of the interviews themselves. And you can see on the right-hand side here, we also used a series of visual artifacts or essentially, visual artifacts, things like these images that we see here that we expected to elicit some reactions from our interview participants, whether they were readers or editors. And we did our best to keep these consistent across languages. So, we have the account creation page in English. We used a version of this for Arabic and Spanish as well. So that basically describes what we were asked to do and how we decided to approach it. At this point, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Daisy, who is going to share with us some selected findings.
Thank you. Mike, if you wouldn't mind continuing to navigate, that would be super helpful. All right, so yes, I'm going to talk about the findings from this research project. As Mike just mentioned, we did have interviews with participants that were kind of semi-structured in the first portion, and we had the feature and artifact identification in the second portion. So I'm also going to kind of divide this into two portions. The first part is going to be kind of just selected findings from transitions that we saw from editors and readers, and then how they responded to those features and artifacts, and then also kind of talk about bigger picture findings. So first we have the editor's selected transitions. As you can see, they're kind of organized by kind of roughly estimated actionability from the foundation's part. And it was kind of created by kind of considering the scope, potential difficulty, and further research needed to understand those transitions and phenomena. And then we have ratings that you can kind of tell the legend is kind of positive, a plus for sign for positive transitions, negative sign for negative transitions. And you might see, I think you might see a neutral transition somewhere in there that's marked by an not applicable, which means that it could be both positive or negative trending. So 4 of these transitions I wanted to point out specifically, which are one is positive, which is transitioning from reading just one language to reading multiple languages. Obviously, for editors, we saw them reading and potentially editing in multiple languages eventually as well. We obviously have now on the new web refresh, the vector refresh, the kind of language selector being more prominently featured. So that factored into this as well. Another positive transition is being initially unaware of Wikipedia's editing process, features, events like editathons, to understanding and actively using them for editors specifically. And 2 of the more negative transitions that we saw from editors are a lot of them downloaded the app and then deleted it. For whatever reason, they didn't find enough utility, didn't have enough space on their phone, and for their purposes of using Wikipedia, they preferred their computer or other kind of more real estate device. And then another negative transition that we saw with some editors. It wasn't necessarily an end-all situation, but we definitely saw some scenarios where they wanted to transition away from editing, whether permanently or just for specific intervals of time. So things that they mentioned are like revision from an admin with no opportunities for recourse, just being generally burned out, and that kind of thing as well. For editors, we have a couple of selected transitions as well. Mike, if you wouldn't mind, thank you so much. So here we saw a couple of transitions from readers, which include shifting from more casual use to academic and work use. And this comes from Wikipedia kind of increasingly being seen as a more serious source of information. So we are seeing more acceptance with Wikipedia and the citations on Wikipedia being used for kind of higher stakes academic assignments and work assignments. Something that's more neutral, could go either way, is we're seeing shifts in information seeking behavior from readers. And so it could be a positive transition in that readers are seeing that for whatever reason, they want to come to Wikipedia for the information that they want, and then also wanting to see more context surrounding it. So obviously Wikipedia articles are very helpful for that, going down rabbit holes, things like that. On the flip side, an example is when Spanish reader finds themselves seeking out sites that are more to the point. That kind of entails things like wanting to see clips of information really quickly. So whether that is in like a nugget size tweet type of format or like a TikTok style quick video format. So that is something we're seeing as well among readers. Another transition is, so these two are basically mirrors of each other. So transition from skepticism to trust. Wikipedia can be seen as more serious and reliable in various anecdotes. So obviously readers place more trust in it. On the flip side, when readers describe seeing issues in a specific Wikipedia page, whether from personal knowledge or just doing their own research and not seeing or I guess seeing some inconsistencies, this can also obviously lead them to trust Wikipedia less. And then with regard to the visual artifacts and feature identification portion of the sessions, we saw that the main article page is obviously widely known for both editors and readers. Things like the table of contents, as I mentioned before, the language selector. This is an example of kind of the last version of the article page view. So the languages were kind of on the left panel on the bottom. Now language selector in the new refresh is a lot more prominent. Another thing that both editors and readers are very familiar with is the donation banner. I believe all the participants, or all the languages that we spoke to with the participants, they all are aware of donation banners. Obviously in some markets they don't exist, but most of the participants we talked to were aware of it. And surprisingly, most of the other visual artifacts and features that we showed users, we had kind of a more wide-ranging, reception in terms of whether readers and editors were both very aware or actually understood them. So even things like talk pages and specific editing mechanics, even editors sometimes showed that they weren't super aware of how they fully worked. So that was a very interesting finding that we saw. So what does this all mean in bigger picture? So for readers, we're seeing kind of a more flat transactional Wikipedia experience. That just essentially means that they see it in a very transactional way. The interactions don't vary too much in terms of type or breadth of activity. So they essentially come to read what they wanted to read, whether it's for classwork or for fun, and then they leave. And then some readers actually describe kind of really memorable moments, memorable transitions, you could say even. But the impact of those moments were not very momentous in the way that we might have assumed previously. So, for example, someone said, "I used Wikipedia to prove my professor wrong in class." And it's like, that's really cool, but not too much necessarily came of that, which is what we would have assumed previously. And the last thing is, so as Mike mentioned, our assumptions were kind of like this linear path. Like everyone starts out as readers, everyone eventually through various transitional moments become editors. So we're seeing readers on possibly a different track entirely, at least some readers. So what does that mean? So it means like we might be trapping readers' potential behind kind of how we view editing. So our assumptions were that they consume content and then transitional moments happen, they become editors, but we're not seeing that. So we want to maybe reevaluate our assumptions around that. Another analogy is readers see information as water and Wikipedia as a utility service. So while they want access to the content with minimal difficulty, they don't necessarily want to know where it comes from how it all works and how it comes to their house or wherever they're accessing the water. And this is another illustration of how readers kind of move through their Wikipedia experience. As you can see, this little timeline here shows kind of little clusters of circles, and these circles kind of show instances of consuming content. As you can see, there might be periods where the circles are larger, and then you have clusters where they go to Wikipedia more to consume content for different reasons, but they are mostly still consuming content, and that's the only action they take for the most part. And then editors, on the other hand, they kind of see opportunity where readers just see content that they can consume. So for various reasons, they actually explore and test things out, test out things like editing, and remain invested, whether they get positive, negative, or neutral feedback on their interactions. And then we also see that editors are actually able to articulate notable experiences that then actually lead them to expand their usage and involvement on Wikipedia. So whereas that reader who proved their professor wrong didn't really end up exploring editing, editors will. And again, we have divergent trajectories. So again, editors are thought of as graduated readers, but we should probably rethink that. They are able to somehow traverse that narrowly defined path that we have in our assumption. So they overcome all sorts of the invisible and intimidating and possibly negative elements that could be hindrances to most readers, but somehow they kind of overcome that. And this is an illustration of the timeline that editors might have. They obviously consume content as well, but they also edit, they participate in events, all sorts of different things. I did want to show that obviously, with the negative transition I described before, there is possibility for burnout for various reasons. Sometimes they don't edit ever again. Sometimes they come back after a while. And I'll pass it back to Mike.
Okay, thank you, Daisy. Yeah, so in the interest of time, I'm going to kind of just try to wrap this up and talk about the implications. What did we think as people who worked on this research project in conjunction with the various stakeholders on the product teams that we're working with? What did we think about what we found? For the group of people that were working on this project, it was quite striking that when we spoke to editors in multiple continents, in multiple languages, we kind of found things that seemed in line with our initial expectations. We did speak to editors who were like, yes, I was in this stage of my life. This event happened. After that, I was an editor. After that, I deepened my relationship through this other event. That was what we were hearing from editors was more or less, it made sense to us. What we were hearing from readers, again, across multiple continents in multiple languages, it was quite striking to us to come back from these interviews and realize that we just spoke to people who have been reading Wikipedia for 10 years in multiple languages. And when we approach them with our, I guess, editor-centric framing, as we see on this slide, they would express to us like, oh, yeah, I actually don't have very much interest in doing what you're telling me about. We saw a kind of a very interesting and noteworthy, I guess, lack of alignment in terms of knowledge about Wikipedia and interest in Wikipedia and even knowledge of the existence of its community among the editors that we were speaking, or among, the readers that we were speaking with. So one takeaway from this is that readers and I guess the editor-centric vocabularies we're seeing here, the editor-centric linear framework of progression is possibly not really sufficient to adequately describe the experience of reading Wikipedia for many of the people who actively read it. there has been growing interest in the foundation in recent years in having a more nuanced understanding of the global readership of Wikipedia. There have been research initiatives coming from a number of different directions and aimed at better understanding what is going on with the reading experience and essentially what readers are looking for. And this project was, essentially formed part of some of those discussions. So at this point, there is definitely active work on the part of multiple product teams in defining the reader experience, in understanding it with more detail, and essentially balancing the opportunity to serve readers and to meet them essentially where they are, and exploring ways for readers to engage with Wikipedia that potentially fall short of what we might consider to be traditional editing, while at the same time meeting obligations to the editing communities that are also served. And yeah, at that, I suppose I will close it out at this point and say thank you for joining us. We're very happy to answer any questions that arise, and yeah, thank you for having us in this forum.
Thank you so much, Mike, and thank you so much, Daisy. I know I have so many questions and thoughts kind of bumping around my head, so I'm very excited for the Q&A. We're going to start. We have a clarification question from YouTube that I think is actually a reasonable place to start. So Miriam, I'm going to pass it to you to voice that.
Yes, so we have a question about the subject selection. And the question goes, I'm wondering how the researchers define experience level of their editor participants, as well as some more information about the methods of subject selection. So if you can just clarify how you select your group of editors, that would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, certainly. That was an active, that was definitely the subject of discussions between ourselves and the product team. Typically, when it comes to editor experience, that can be defined in a lot of different ways. Very often, people find themselves using easy-to-use indicators like total edit count within a period of time. In our case, we let's see, Daisy, you can chime in if I'm missing anything here. I'm also going to note that this research was planned out and conducted about a year to a year and a half ago. But from my recollection, the editors that we spoke to, we used a combination of, I think, self-identification and essentially years editing. We didn't have access to anybody's edit counts. We didn't have access to their profiles. Many of these people, most of them were sourced from, I guess, external sources. We didn't necessarily connect to them through Wikipedia. So it was a self-identification, essentially, in the self-identification, we were focusing more on, subjective years of activity as an editor. In reading experience, that was also a very tricky one for us to figure out, because our requesting teams were very interested in, okay, we want to talk to new readers and experienced readers. That was a very interesting conversation to have, and that actually led to the elaboration of a couple of the diagrams that we saw earlier. And yeah, we essentially adopted more of a spectrum approach when it came to reading, because it turns out that I guess reading experience is a very difficult thing to get external participants to essentially agree on, or at least approach with the same framing that we were starting with. And I suppose the second half of the question was specific methods. I can describe very briefly the structure of these interviews. We essentially opened up, started out by asking people to describe their daily, weekly, monthly use of Wikipedia, tell us about why they use it. Typically in projects or interviews like this, participants tend to have a lot to say when you start asking people, what brings you here? Why do you visit Wikipedia? People very quickly begin linking that to different life events. we kind of progressed through a script that we had, which was semi-structured. We touched on phases of educational status. That came out very clearly from especially the reader interviews. If people are able to identify different stages of their relationship with Wikipedia, in our interviews, it came out very clearly through people telling us about different stages of their education and the ways that they used it in, high school, college, graduate school, professional, et cetera. We had a set of visual artifacts, I think 5 or 6 or so. We did our best to essentially take versions of the same artifact from the different languages that we were working with. But it was a semi-structured interview, so we allowed ourselves essentially a lot of room to ask follow-up questions and follow different threads as they arose. I hope that was helpful.
Yeah, thank you, Mike, for those details. I'm going to pass it now to Morten for another question.
Thank you, Isaac, and thank you, Daisy and Mike, for an awesome presentation. This is really cool work, and hopefully I'll remember to make callbacks to it during my presentation because I could see all the connections. I had a question and kind of like trying to understand a little bit more about this difference between kind of like readers and editors. It sounds to me like there's like we perceive it as this like linear transition, or sort of like you have to be a reader, you have to read a Wikipedia article to become an editor, and kind of seeing that. But from what you were describing, it kind of sounds like there might be kind of some fundamental difference in perception of the site when they show up, in that like an editor is going to show up and think, I can do something here, I have opportunities, versus a reader doesn't see that. Or I'm trying to kind of like understand, there seems to be like kind of like this like, how does someone, like, what's the causal effect of becoming an editor, right? And trying to understand that. And so I was wondering if there was something in the work that you've done that helped kind of clarify this.
Yeah, there was, and sorry, Daisy and I don't have a good back channel for determining who's going to respond here, but yeah, there was a slide that we cut for time reasons that was all about missed opportunities, as a matter of fact. But to I guess the larger framing of your question, Morten, like, yes, that was a major takeaway in kind of a head scratcher / eye-opening moment for the requesting product team specifically, in that many of the readers we spoke to just simply conceived of what they were doing in drastically different terms than how we were talking about it inside this team in the foundation when we were planning this out. Many people we spoke to were, I mean, I suppose this isn't totally unheard of. We hear indications of this from other sources of research as well. But yeah, many people we spoke to were unaware that Wikipedia is supported by a nonprofit rather than being a private company. Many people were unaware that Wikipedia can be edited. People who've been reading it for a very long time were expressing this to us. Many people were, when towards the end of the interview, if the opportunity arose and, the certain concepts could be clarified, many people were very ready to declare to us that, well, I don't know, I have no interest in doing that. What you mean people do that for free? So it was very interesting to be hearing this from people who have been using it often as an essential part of their education for years. But that's not to say that people who read Wikipedia and don't actively express an interest in knowing more about how it works aren't potentially interested in deepening their engagement with it. We've been seeing indications from other sources lately that many readers actually do want to engage with the site. They do want ways to categorize what they read, to know more about who writes it. And yeah, there has been growing interest, I think, in the foundation side for supporting those types of engagement that fall short of traditional editing. And so, sorry, Martin, I don't know if that was if that hit all your points, but thank you for the question.
And I'll also add that it kind of ranges for readers what the missed editing connections are. And then also I wanted to talk very briefly about the fact that we had a project called Non-Editing Participation, which kind of came a little bit out of this project, which explores the various ways in which you can contribute without actually doing direct content editing. But in terms of editing directly, I would say that obviously a misconnection would be if you are a reader who completely does not know that editing is a thing that you can do. And then the next level is obviously you know about editing, but you lack a direct link to it for whatever reason. So in contrast, I would say a lot of editors described having that link as a motivating factor for them to continue, whether or not they had positive or negative interactions. So for example, just even having a friend who introduces them to an editathon, like that is something that a lot of readers lack, and that is a potential connection point that just doesn't exist for a lot of readers. And then beyond that, there's like a mix. Obviously, you can know about editing, collaborating, but there's a gap that exists between like your personal capacity and opportunity to do so. So maybe you don't even know what to edit because a lot of people, a lot of readers say, well, Wikipedia is complete. Like everything that I've seen is really thorough. What can I even do? And then you have the readers who say, well, I don't feel comfortable editing because I'm not like a PhD or of something. We even have talked to just participants in the past who are actual PhDs, and they're like, I don't know if I'm qualified enough to contribute. So that's yet another facet of it. So.
Thank you both. I'm going to call on Miriam for a question from Hamid from YouTube. But while we're doing that, let's do this one because I think it's pretty quick, and then we can switch over to Morten for his presentation and more questions at the end. Miriam.
Yeah, may I say, Mike and Daisy, you're receiving lots of love for the presentation and the topic. So thank you for sharing and thank you for the wonderful insights. We have a question from Hamid, who's asking about any insights about device. So if there is any mention by editors or readers about the platform they use to consume Wikipedia, such as mobile users, that was noteworthy.
I don't recall directly any specific device specific findings. I will say that I was surprised that more editors really said that they had little interest in using the app. And quite a few of them had explored it, and like I mentioned in the negative transitions, they just deleted it. And I was very curious to kind of explore that further. I don't recall any device-specific findings for readers, though. Mike, do you recall any?
Yeah, I do, as a matter of fact. And yeah, regarding the app usage, again, this is anecdotal rather than, kind of a large-scale quantitative study. But yes, we did, as Daisy mentioned, I think kind of surprisingly for me, engage with both readers and editors who had used the app at some point in the past, but had stopped using it. So that was kind of something, an interesting thing to take note of. As far as device usage goes, what I recall, and I can go back into like the main findings deck to double check, but from what I recall, especially I recall this from the Spanish language interviews when we got a lot of device related feedback from, is that it was contextual. So people use Wikipedia, and this is, again, I'm saying on the part of readers here, readers who reported to us in these interviews that they use different devices at different times or different for different purposes, those changes were, again, due to context. You're on your laptop at work, you use Wikipedia for your work tasks. Therefore, you're going to be using your laptop to look at these topics that are related to your work. Whereas if you're on your commute, readers would tell us that, yeah, that's when the more like personal interest, hobby type reading happens, which happens more on the phone. So I guess the device breakdown that stands out to me from these interviews wasn't so much that, a different topic requires a different device, but that you naturally use different devices for different purposes throughout your day. And since you're using Wikipedia to support different aspects of your life, essentially, that is going to affect your device usage.
Thank you. Thank you. We're gonna have more time for questions at the end. I'm loving this engagement, this discussion. But Morten, I will now pass it to you to prepare or to present your work.
Thank you, Isaac. Hopefully you can see my slides. Awesome.
All good.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. So I'm Morten. I'm a data scientist in the product analytics team at the Wikimedia Foundation. As Isaac said, I'm here to talk about the growth features, basically features developed by the growth team at the Wikimedia Foundation to increase participation by newcomers in Wikipedia. And that is also then connected to a research paper we published at the ACM CSUW conference last year. So I'm going to start off with the main message of today's talk. We'll go through and give you an overview of the growth team's features and show how they increase newcomer participation, and also that they're available on Wikipedia wikis, which is super cool. We'll talk about how solutions to increase newcomer participation need to adapt to both the needs of the newcomer as well as the needs of the community. And then we'll lastly also mention that sometimes you need fundamental changes to increase participation, because there might be structures in place that make participation difficult. And so what motivates this work that we've been doing? When you start reading up on the research literature, and you'll see this in our paper too, is that everyone says you got to build something like the growth team features, or specifically the newcomer homepage, which we'll see later. One of the papers I want to highlight is by Steinmacher et al. That studied barriers to entry in open source software. And they talk about that there needs to be a central place where newcomers can learn how to contribute and find easy tasks to start out with, which also, people talked about in the previous presentation about how they might not know where can I make a contribution. In 2017, Reboot and the Wikimedia Foundation did a research study where they interviewed newcomers to Korean and Czech Wikipedia. And one of the things they found was that understanding how Wikipedia works was a challenge. Again, as we also talked about, people aren't aware that you can edit, that there's a community behind it, that it's not run by a company as mentioned, and so on. And lastly, we build on Lavin Wenger's framework for legitimate peripheral participation. Wikipedia is a community of practice. Editing is a practice you do. And in their book, Situated Learning, there are 3 key elements for learning that they mention. Access to participation, so like being able to participate. And this also in the Reboot and WMF study is referred to as progressive pathways to editing. Access to mentors, so having someone who can help you understand how things work, and access to learning materials. And so what do the growth features look like? So the growth team at the Wikimedia Foundation, in its current iteration, started out in 2018. And one of the first things they built was the welcome survey. This is a optional short survey after you create your account on Wikipedia, and asks you, as you can see on the screen, a few questions about why did you create your account? Have you ever edited Wikipedia? And what kind of languages do you read and write in? The questions have slightly modified over the years. And so, for instance, they've been used to recruit people in research and surveys and interviews too. This was A/B tested. We ran it randomly to users early on, found out that it doesn't affect site abandonment or site editing. So it isn't a blocker to people making edits. It's now shown on 100% of people who create accounts on wikis, all the Wikipedia wikis. And it gives insight into, why do people join? Why do they create their account? Have they edited Wikipedia, and so on? And there's more information about this at the welcome survey page on MediaWiki. We also have some initial results from when we launched this in 2018 as well. There's also a help panel, just a guidance panel that pops up when you edit. It's also used as guidance for when you do suggested edits, which I'll show you a little bit later. And it gives you access to help pages. And if you are assigned a mentor, you can ask your mentor a question through this help panel as well. And it's not just available when editing, it's available on talk pages, pages in the help namespace, and so on. And then there's the newcomer homepage, which is the focus of the research paper we published. And this is the central place to learn how Wikipedia works, get started editing, and so on. And the features of the homepage match these three aspects of legitimate peripheral participation that I mentioned earlier. There's access to participation, which is what the main module on the page, which is called suggested edits. There's access to mentors through the mentorship module, and there's access to learning materials through the help module. And again, there's also more information about this on the newcomer homepage page on MediaWiki. And these suggested edits, which also is often named newcomer tasks, is the case where you solve the problem of what do I do? Like, where can I contribute? As Mike and Daisy mentioned, this is a question that comes up when you interview people that they might struggle with understanding where to contribute. It's also a frequent question on, for instance, English Wikipedia's Tea House is like, I made a few edits, what do I do next? And typically these are set up so people start out with small tasks like copy editing. And you can also indicate what topics you're interested in to make it narrow down to things that you actually want to do. And the growth team also set up a very specific work process. And I'm going to mention this because it helps understand the context of the experiment that we're reporting results on later. And one of the things that the team did is to partner with pilot wikis. Currently, there are 2 Arabic and Spanish Wikipedia. When it started out, we ended up having 4, Czech, Korean, Arabic, and Vietnamese. But these have changed slightly over the years. And in these pilot wikis, there's the community ambassador who is hired part-time to be a representative to help collaborate and help communicate between the team and the community. And also when we develop features, they are run on these pilot wikis in controlled experiments. The welcome survey was the start. That was initially run just on Czech and Korean Wikipedia in an A/B test. We work and measure things on the desktop and mobile web sites. Some of the features have since made it into some of the mobile apps, but the experience there is very different, and so we generally don't develop projects to run there, but we do a lot of sharing with the community about what the experiment plans are, what a list of leading indicators we have, evaluation of these soon after the experiment starts so we can understand if things are working as they should, and what results we have as well. These are generally linked to or posted on the project pages for each of the project the team does. And then also users can opt in and out during these experiments. They can turn the features on and off. So and also we add features. We haven't run an experiment where we take things away from people. And so we've, deemed this to be kind of low risk experimentation, both because you can opt out if you want to, and we've only added features to the experience. And as we talked about, I think this was mentioned, the target audience is a new account. Someone registers an account on a specific wiki, and we want to try to improve their experience and engage them after that account creation point. We exclude what's called auto-created accounts from this. And so if you have, say an account on English Wikipedia and you go read French Wikipedia, the system is going to automatically create an account for you on French Wikipedia as well. These are technically separate things. But in that case, the features aren't automatically turned on for you. And we disregard them from the analysis because we are mainly focused on a specific language community. And and don't, yeah, try to kind of like make the experiments easier that way. As we mentioned here, increasing account registration or, exposing the features to unregistered editors is ideas that have been on the board for a long time, but it hasn't gotten to that yet. May or may not do it as well. And then lastly, there's basically a phased rollout process. And so we start out with these few pilot wikis, as we talked about. And then once we've learned from experiments and possibly made changes, we roll it out to more wikis on an opt-in basis. So the communities have to agree to do this. It's not like we come and say, hey, we got some features, we're going to start rolling them out now. And then we gather experiences and feedback from them. And then once things seem to be working the way they should, then we can roll it out to everyone. And so, as I mentioned, now the growth features are on all the Wikipedia wikis, so they have reached everyone, but not all features are available on all the wikis. And so we ran this newcomer homepage experiment that is mentioned in the research paper. That is the main gist of this talk, and also linked from the research showcase page. And in this case, I'm going to talk about the evaluation that we did of the newcomer homepage based on a data set from April 2021, February to April 2021. This spans 27 Wikipedia wikis, and many of the larger wikis were excluded. So like German Wikipedia is not part of it. English Wikipedia is not part of it, but these have been added later. We chose this time period because this were a time where the features of the newcomer homepage were stable, and they were the same features that we saw earlier. And it's about 2 years since the initial launch of the homepage, and we're in phase 2 of this rollout cycle. We have run experiments with these early pilot wikis, and we're starting to expand to other wikis as they say, yes, we would like to get these features. And we evaluate the effectiveness of the homepage on 4 key metrics: the rate of activation, which I'll define in a second, and rate of retention, which I'll also mention. And these two have a time window that we defined based on data from Czech and Korean Wikipedia in 2018. We're aiming to affect newcomers early on. And so we're typically focusing on the first 2 weeks after you register an account. So activation rate is the proportion of users who edit within 24 hours after registration. And this 24-hour window is chosen because most of the people who go on to make an edit after registration will do so in the first 24 hours. It's like on the order of 85 to 90%. And you will increase that to maybe 90, 95% if you expand it to a week. So we chose that faster window. The retention rate is the proportion of activated users who return to edit again, in our case within 2 weeks, because we want to try to have that early effect. We also in the paper replicate 2 other time windows from Morgan and Halfacre's 2018 Tea House paper, which is way longer retention windows. So we test that as well for replication and connection. When it comes to productivity, we're looking at the number of edits that a newcomer makes across this 15-day newcomer period. And then we also examine the revert rate, because if we make them make a lot of edits, but the community says these are not good edits, well, then we haven't really improved the newcomer experience. And here we use a 48-hour window after an edit was made based on the Geiger and Halfacre paper from 2013. And our experiment is an encouragement design. You're encouraged to go to the homepage, you're encouraged to make suggested edits, but you're not required to. And then we analyze this using both an intent to treat approach, where we get the effect of being encouraged to do so, and then a 2-stage least squares analysis, where you get the unbiased estimate of the effect of taking this treatment, provided you were encouraged to do so. And what we find is that overall, we have a small but significant increase in activation rate. And so we're engaging more users on their first day on the wiki. The two-stage least squares analysis show that, unfortunately, we're replacing their self-motivated work with these newcomer tasks, these suggested edits. And the effect size is fairly small. When it comes to productivity, the number of edits they made, we see similar results. There's no significant increase, and the two-stage least squares show that there's a replacement effect going on. We find no difference in retention rate, but this is keeping first day activity constant, because people who are more active on the first day are more likely to come back and edit again, so you got to control for that. Since we increase activation, we do increase the number of retained users overall. But if you compare two users with the same activity levels, they're just about the same likelihood of being retained. And then when it comes to the revert rate, we see no change. We use a fairly novel approach to analyze this. We use a fairly complicated Bayesian model to do this. There are more details about this in the paper, but we do find that these newcomers aren't more or less likely to get their edits reverted. And basically the way we interpret these results is that while we do engage newcomers, we haven't significantly altered the key activity on the wiki, which is editing articles. What we do find in the paper is that, unsurprisingly, context matters, and we add some additional data to dig more deeply into this. What we did in this experiment is introduce two obstacles to newcomers. The welcome survey, as we've talked about earlier, it's short, it has an amazing response rate, but it's still a slight obstacle to go over. And then secondly, we added these notifications because we would like people to know about the homepage and go there. But what happens if you're trying to make an edit as you are registering your account? A lot of wikis will pop up a little notice that says you are not logged in, but you're trying to edit. Would you like to register your account? And in our data set, at least 26% of users were attempting to do this when they were registering. And basically what we find is that we're distracting these users. We see a slightly negative effect on activation for them, but we see a larger positive effect for those who are not editing. And one of the cool things about the growth team is that they take this learning and make modifications to the user flow. And so now, if you are editing at the point of registration, you do not get the survey, you don't get the notifications, but you get a post-edit dialog after saving your edit that says, hey, do you want to go check out the homepage? And then another thing that we talk about in the paper is people who sign up to read Wikipedia. So we asked two questions in the welcome survey. Why did you create your account, and have you ever edited Wikipedia before? And about 10% of users respond to the survey that they created their account to read Wikipedia. And from kind of like our perspective, and this goes back to the Journey Transitions work, you don't need an account to read Wikipedia. But also, this is where I want to mention the non-editing participation research that Daisy mentioned. People have different expectations of the experience when they create an account. And about 10% of users answer this question in this way. And when you look at these users, you see a very strong effect of the newcomer homepage. The increase in activation is relatively a lot larger, but the baseline is very low. And so, yes, the effect is great, but you're kind of affecting a small part of your population. But in that case, you're raising this awareness of the fact that it's possible to read Wikipedia, to edit Wikipedia. Sorry. So I'm going to try to quickly mention a few kind of key points in the discussion and try to wrap this up. As I talked about, we didn't fundamentally change editing, but the growth team has done that in the time since. Editing Wikipedia is a challenge, particularly as a newcomer. And so the growth team has developed what we call structured tasks, where you break down an edit into a step-by-step workflow to make it easier. And there have been two of these: add a link, which is a structured flow to add a few links to an article, and then add an image. Like let's add an image to the top of the article. These have been successful, they increase activation a lot more than we've seen in previous experiments. We released the add-on image experiment results about a month ago, and they have a much larger improvement, particularly on the mobile web. Then we come back to what Isaac talked about at the introduction. Wikipedians are both born and made. There's research that points to that, some contributors show up and they're already capable, they know what they're doing, and they go from the first second they make a lot of edits and they make good edits, right? And some others show up and they need to learn the process, and these are what we call made. The homepage experiment supports this with the different contexts and so on. And I also wanted to mention a later experiments that we've done, which we called, which are part of the positive reinforcement project, where we sent these notifications to users who had not made suggested edits within 48 hours of registering. And while we see these overall positive effects, this is modified by how many edits you've made. And so those users who are really active don't have that positive effect, while users who have not edited or made just a few edits have that positive effect of these notifications. And so again, you have that newcomer context challenge when you're trying to build these features. Then I wanted to mention too that the needs of the community can matter. If the Wikipedia, for instance, if you're looking at a smaller wiki that might not have a large community and a streamlined editing review process, you might want to reduce the number of edits that are happening, or maybe you have, a different kind of like community where you're able to more easily reach out to newcomers. And so the growth team is currently working on what's called community configuration, and they already had this for the growth features, but they're expanding it to make it more generally available and so on, where the community itself can choose how they want the features to be working, reducing the number of add-a-link edits you can make per day, or the number of links that are suggested, for instance, or disabling a feature if they need to. And so in conclusion, as we talked about, the key takeaways, the growth features increase newcomer participation, and they are available on all Wikipedia wikis. And these solutions need to adapt to both the newcomer and community needs. And sometimes you need a fundamental change to actually have a positive impact. And I wanted to mention that you can go test this out yourself. You can turn these on in your preferences. Here are the preferences that they're shown in English. If you don't have them available, you can go change that and go try them out, see what they are. And then I want to give some shout outs and acknowledgements. First, current and past, and possibly future members of the growth team, who are the ones that have done this development work that I have the fortunate situation to support. I want to mention Kirsten, who's the current product manager, who made a lot of the slides and was going to present this together with me today, but unfortunately couldn't make it. Marshall and Rita, the former product manager and lead designer on the team, who are co-authors on the paper and essential in the work. And also the community relations specialist, Benoit, who has done all the communication with the communities and enabling these experiments and so on. I want to give a shout out to our partner wiki ambassadors, particularly Habib, Martin, Blue TPP, and Ravi, who were ambassadors at the time of the experiment was happening. Also the communities that participated in the experiment, as well as the broader community for being, making this content available and letting us experiment with them. And lastly, the volunteer CSCW reviewers, who did an excellent job with reviewing our paper and giving us really good feedback that improved it immensely. And with that, I am done. Thank you so much. Sorry it ran a little long.
Thank you, Morten. Yes, I'm a big fan of this work. The breadth at which you all have designed these interventions and the care you've taken in kind of measuring what's going on and understanding what's going on. So thank you for sharing. I think I'm going to start with a topic that came up both in your presentation and also came up in Mike and Daisy. So I feel like it's a good kind of cross-cutting topic. It's the context matters slide, and thinking about yeah, just the importance of context. Miriam and I were talking a little bit about topics, and that's one that I'm in particular interested in. Like, to what degree does an editor's topic of interest matter as far as their engagement? Yeah, like the ability to kind of be able to filter down by topic. So I'd love to hear maybe a bit from you on that and whether there's any other really important contexts. And then actually, Yuming, I know you have a question for Mike and Daisy around another kind of context matters piece. So let's start though with this.
So if I'm just getting the question right, does the ability to select the topics of what you want to work on kind of matter on when it comes to success, the success of a newcomer on the wiki, right? It's one of those kind of deeper questions that we haven't been able to really dig into. We do know that users set their topics, and it depends a little bit on what platform you're on as well. We ran an experiment and we found out that on the mobile platform, users aren't really interested in going through the module initialization process. And so they, if you say, well, you got to choose your topics and choose your tasks before you see any edits, then they're not going to they're not going to complete that process. But on the desktop site, they are. And so that's one of the areas where the experimentation told us that we should have the user experience change. And so on desktop, we kind of force them to go and make choices on that. I still think, like, all my experience suggests that users are generally focused on, certain interest areas, and so and they would like to have, things that they want to have work that has some connection to that, either because that it's like, well, that this feels more worthwhile to them, or because it's an area where they might have knowledge that they can contribute, where it's more it's possible for them to look at something and say, hey, here's an opportunity for making a change, right? But it's definitely that kind of deeper question. That's something that we talk about in the paper about, like, well, bringing in these data sources and trying to dig more into, are there certain topics that are more successful, and possibly are there certain, like, geographical topics that really help out, for instance, too, if possible. Does that help answer your question?
Yeah, and I think, Yuming, can I ask you to ask your question to Mike and Daisy, because I wonder if there's anything from their work that also kind of feeds briefly into this.
Sure, thanks, Isaac. So the question I had for both of you was just around the issue of sort of the interaction of life transitions with kind of maybe Wikipedia reading transitions. And I was thinking specifically of, folks sort of transitioning in and out of formal schooling. Something we've seen, right, in our recent readers surveys, just there's a lot of people who are currently students who are reading. And one of the natural questions that arises is just, well, what happens after they leave school, right? Do they sort of build habits that sort of persist, or do we see their reading habits changing as they sort of leave school? Maybe there's topical changes as well.
Yeah, thanks, Yuming. And yeah, I'll just answer with my perspective based on these interviews that we conducted in a couple of different languages. What came through for me is that readers who were able to articulate different phases of their relationship with Wikipedia, they tended to associate those phases with progression through educational stages, as you mentioned. What I took away from that is that readers were describing Wikipedia essentially as a tool. They used it for specific purposes when it made sense according to their needs, whether those needs were associated with a particular class or program of study. Often people used Wikipedia for specific work-related tasks, or within a specific domain of knowledge that was associated with their profession. But using that tool did not necessarily imply that somebody would continue to have a need for it in the same way once they moved out of that life stage. It also didn't imply that I guess to continue the water analogy, that they needed to know where the tool was manufactured or how other people use it, or I guess like the specific need that prompted them to use Wikipedia in a specific way that they could articulate with us often started and stopped with a particular job or a particular program of study. And yeah, that was my takeaway from that section of the interviews.
Thanks, Mike. And that's what, that's, I think, one of the reasons I really like the newcomer homepage is it feels like it can provide some of the structure to, when the structure from life maybe is no longer there, the newcomer homepage in many ways can continue to provide a structure for engagement, which I'm a big fan of. I'm going to, Miriam, ask you to bring us a question from YouTube.
Yes, thank you, Isaac. Thank you, Morten, for the presentation. Lots of love for you as well. Very, very important topic. So SJ has two questions that I'm going to combine because the first one is just a curiosity. So the first one is what is the percentage of people starting creating an account and that they then don't finish, if you know that? And then there is a question about the specific newcomer tasks and how would we tag an article for inclusion in the add a link or add an image rotation? Is it using cleanup categories or other forms of tagging? I know the answer to this one, but please go ahead.
No, thank you for the questions. When it comes to the first one, I don't think we currently have good data on it, but we are in the process of instrumenting that because of the upcoming changes to accounts and switching from non-registered users. But I think maybe there was some work done around that about 10 years ago when they were first trying to encourage users to register. And so I don't have a good answer off the top of my head for that one. But I also seems like I think it's easier to kind of talk about what are some of the known barriers to registration rather than the exact percentages. When it comes to the second question, for the structured tasks, these are both machine learning based tasks. And so when it comes to the other tasks for suggested edits, they are based on templates that are added. And so through the templates, the community sets up what templates fall into a certain type of work. And so, for instance, the copy editing task has a certain template associated with it. When it comes to the structured tasks, they're both machine learning based. And so the research team, our wonderful research team, of which Miriam is one of the members who worked on the Add an Image project. And then I want to give a shout out to Michael Gerlach and also folks who came before us when it comes to the add a link task. There's an algorithm that identifies words or phrases in articles that should be linked to other articles. And so those are based on that. But for instance, the add an image task, I know that it uses a set of heuristics. And so for instance, one of the things it looks at is this article linked to other article in other languages, and are those illustrated? And so if there's an image that's used on an article in a different language, it's going to recommend to add that to this to the language that you're looking at, for instance, as well. And so there is this possibility of, well, if you add an image to an article in a given language that it didn't have it, that's then going to end up being recommended to other people in other languages.
Thank you. I know Pablo has a question, so Pablo, I'm going to jump to you now.
Thank you, Isaac. Is this working? All right. Well, so first, thank you all, like Mike, Daisy, Martin, for these amazing talks. Like, and the session overall is super great. So I have a question for Morten. Like, your talk makes me think about this old paper, the No Country for All Members by Christian Danescu and others, that they were studying like the linguistic patterns of communities and newcomers. And I love one finding they go like the more similar the language of the newcomer, the longer the newcomer stay in the community. And that relates somehow with what you presented today about the context matter, and also with some things that Mike and Daisy presented too. So in your talk, you saw like the impressive work of the cross team on doing interventions to facilitate their onboarding in the community. I'm wondering if there is also like work to do interventions in the community. So how the communities can be intervened to have like a more welcoming language, a more welcoming practices or policies or procedure, for not to put the responsibility in the mediators and the newcomers, but also the community itself, and creating like more open spaces.
Yeah, thank you for asking that, Pablo. That's a great question, and it really points to parts of the work that I didn't cover in this talk and that we didn't cover in the paper too. And so this is one of the areas where our community resource specialist, Benoit, has done a lot of work on helping create communities that are more welcoming, and also where the mentorship module and the work on mentorship comes in, where in addition to, and so the mentorship module is shown on the newcomer homepage for a newcomer, but it requires experienced contributors to sign up to be mentors. So they have to volunteer and say, hey, I want to be one of these people. And also it comes with a set of guidelines for how you treat newcomers, you know. And so it is that, and clear guidelines about how do you respond to questions, like what are the phrasing you should use and things like that too. And that it kind of like also reminds me of, and I also I agree that the old country, No Country for Old Members paper is really interesting in this, about how linguistic changes in the community affect retention, right? It's a fascinating paper, and I recommend people to read it. And I was thinking about, like, in the tea house paper, about the design of the tea house too. And I know that Jonathan Morgan and others have done interesting work here on how norms are used and perceived, and how you communicate with newcomers affect how other people communicate with newcomers, because they're going to see the norms that you are enacting through your work, you know, what you do. And so yes, and in the newcomer homepage paper, we talk about that we skip mentorship because it deserves its own paper. It's a super interesting topic, and the team has also done cool work there with the mentorship dashboard, and we've done experiments with sending positive feedback to newcomers and so on. And so there's definitely this whole this other side of it about how do you create a welcoming community for newcomers? How do you support them? How do you help enact that welcoming attitude and so on? And yeah, I know that again, that Benoit has done a lot of really good work on that. And so when we like, one of the things I remember from deploying the newcomer homepage to more wikis was that they have to make sure that they have help pages for all the different links that are on the newcomer homepage, and kind of a set of things like that too. So there's work for the community to do to make sure that they have the things that the newcomers need, for instance.
Yeah, thank you, Martin. I was thinking that there's also this paper by Leila and others about the thing usage that also relates to that. Thanks.
I'm really, really loving this conversation. And I also, like myself, there's things around non-editing participation that I know Mike and Daisy, you all have worked on. And I'm so curious to talk about, like, where does the reader like pathway go if it's not going towards editors? And I know also connects with some of the things Growth is thinking about. So I feel like we could go on and on and on. So I'm loving this, but at the same time, be cognizant of time. Layla has a really great question. I think is a good one to end on. So I'm going to pass to her, and then maybe each of the three of you can take 30 seconds to give kind of a quick thoughts to it, and then we'll close up. So Layla, take the floor.
Cool. Thank you so much, Isaac. So my question to you all and everyone else in the call, and also those of you who are joining and watching online either now or later in the future is, given what you know about this space, if you could run one experiment today to test how to potentially help a reader to become an editor or do that one step of account creation, what would you test? And whoever wants to go, please do it. I would love to learn.
Since we're all being quiet, I'll go first. But I did have to think about this a little bit. I think I would start with a little notification that says, did you know you could edit Wikipedia, and points to the kind of like edit button. But maybe since, you know, if you say, yes, this is like interesting, it'll give you a little bit more context and information about what editing Wikipedia looks like. The growth team has these onboarding dialogues for both structured tasks and for suggested edits, and so basically giving you a little bit of context. So I think it's something like that to get a sense of, you know, is this interesting, and are we able to convert users? Because I think like one of the things we've learned, I'll try to be super quick, is that there's a lot of different subgroups of users out there. And you might not be able to affect everyone, but you might be able to affect a certain subgroup in a really powerful way. And if we can do that, I would possibly have a big impact for those, and that would be cool.
I'll jump in with like a speculative answer as well. Thanks for the question. That's very interesting. I also had to think about it for a while. Like for me, I think I'm really interested in the fact that there are a lot of small and medium-sized Wikipedias out there that show sustained growth. They have a lot of activity, a lot of dynamic energy in them. And so I would like to somehow like incorporate the fact that like an answer to the question of what turns, you know, stated very simply and blithely, you know, what could turn a reader into an editor? The answer to that question, you know, there's got to be something going on with the individual community that somebody is coming into, the size of the community, the global or cultural or linguistic context, the composition of their peers. And yeah, it would be really nice to be able to follow along with people, maybe get like a very large cohort of people and in, you know, a range of different Wikipedia sizes, and, you know, see what can we learn about that small subset of people that do turn into sustained and retained editors who continue for a long time. I have no idea how feasible that is, but yeah, like it seems like there's a lot to be learned about the different contexts in which people are retained in various sized wikis.
So I would just add that a lot of this work is in a way like fighting entropy. And so I think the difficulty is that, well, I think I just want to echo what everyone has said so far, in that it is not just a quick fix. It's a very holistic, multifaceted way of having to address all of these different areas where we can have influence. And then kind of the bigger picture things, yeah, I think it's like the amalgamation of all these efforts in these discrete ways hopefully creates that environment for people where they do feel motivated and they do feel engaged. So it's, yeah, we have to work in a lot of different channels to make this happen.
Thank you, Daisy. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Morton. And I'll thank Grocery Heist as well, who put a comment in YouTube chat. And I encourage folks to check that out. But at this point, I will pass to Kinneret to close this out.
Thank you, Isaac, and thank you everyone for joining the Wikimedia Research Showcase today, and a special thank you for all the lively discussion in the chat. It was great. Another special thank you to our speakers, Mike, Daisy, and Morton, for their contributions and work on this. And the Wikimedia Research Showcase is made possible thanks to the coordinating team. So thank you, Isaac and Miriam, for taking the questions in the chat and helping set all of this up. As a quick reminder, there will be no showcase next month since we will be focusing on Wiki Workshop. So please don't forget to register, and we'll be back in July with another showcase. Looking forward to seeing you all there.